The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached beyond the solar system. After centuries of dreaming about the stars, they had built ships that could travel faster than light. The colony ship Evergreen was one of the finest vessels ever made by human hands. It carried 12,000 people toward a new world called 442b, a planet with blue oceans and green forests that looked almost like Earth. Captain Samuel Grant stood on the bridge of the Evergreen, watching the stars pass by through the large viewing window. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen many wonders in his 50 years of life. This mission was supposed to be his greatest achievement. He would help establish humanity's first colony outside the solar system. Humanity had learned they were not alone in the universe about 30 years ago. Signals from the galactic community had reached Earth, and people had celebrated. The Concord of 12 was a group of 12 alien species that had been traveling among the stars for thousands of years. They controlled most of the galaxy and watched younger species with mild interest. The aliens had made their feelings about humans very clear. To them, Earth was a small and unimportant world. Humans were primitives who had just learned to walk among the stars. They could join the galactic community if they wished, but only as a minor species. Nobody would pay much attention to them. Samuel had spent his whole career trying to prove that humans deserved respect. His crew was made up of the best people Earth had to offer. His first officer, Lieutenant Commander Vance, was a brilliant woman who could solve any problem. Dr. Park was a genius scientist who kept all the ship's systems running perfectly. Together, they would show the galaxy what humans could do. They were 3 weeks away from their new home when everything changed. Was the first to see the warning on her screen. Her face went pale as she read the data. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships coming out of hyperspace. They're big, really big." Samuel walked over to her station and looked at the readings. His heart sank when he saw the ship's signatures, warships. They were one of the founding members of the Concord of 12. They were tall, insect-like creatures with hard shells covering their bodies. Their culture was built on conquest and domination. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. The communication system crackled to life. A harsh voice spoke through the translator. "Human vessel, you have entered sovereign space. You will surrender your ship and all passengers for processing. Do not resist." Samuel felt cold fear in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "This is Captain Samuel Grant of the Earth vessel Evergreen. We are a civilian colony ship carrying families and children. We have no weapons and no hostile intentions. We only ask for safe passage." The commander laughed. It was an ugly sound that made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. "Safe passage is not granted. Your species has no rights in this region of space. Surrender now, or we will take you by force." Had been working at her station the whole time. She turned to Samuel with horror in her eyes. "Captain, I've been looking at their records. They've done this before. They capture ships from young species, steal their technology, and sell the people as slaves to the outer rim markets." Before Samuel could respond, the ships opened fire. Bright plasma bolts tore through the Evergreen's hull. The ship shook violently, and people screamed throughout the corridors. Alarms blared as systems failed one after another. Samuel grabbed the communication console. "All hands, this is the captain. Get to the emergency shelters, protect the children, do whatever the aliens say, stay alive." He managed to launch 3 emergency beacons before the boarding parties reached them. These small devices would travel back toward human space and tell Earth what had happened. It was the only thing he could do. The soldiers were terrifying. They stood 7 feet tall, with sharp claws and mandibles that clicked when they spoke. They moved through the Evergreen like hunters through a forest, dragging humans from their hiding places without mercy. Samuel watched as his people were put in chains. Families were torn apart. Children cried for their parents. His crew members who tried to fight back were beaten until they stopped moving. It was a nightmare that he could not wake up from. Fought harder than anyone. She knocked down 3 soldiers before their commander grabbed her arm and twisted it until the bones broke. She screamed in pain but still tried to kick him. The commander just laughed at her courage. Dr. Park refused to hand over the ship's technical data. He stood in front of his computer terminal and told them that they would never get humanity's secrets. The commander shot him in the chest without hesitation, fell to the ground and did not get up again. Samuel tried to reach his friend, but 2 soldiers held him back. He could only watch as died with his eyes open, still defiant even at the end. The commander walked up to Samuel and looked down at him with what might have been amusement. "You humans are entertaining, so brave and so foolish. You come to the stars thinking you matter. You do not. You are nothing but cargo to be sold." He leaned closer, his mandibles clicking inches from Samuel's face. "I will let you live, human captain. I will put you in a broken escape pod with enough fuel to drift back to your people. You will tell them what happened here. You will tell them what happens to species that forget their place in the galaxy." Samuel was dragged to a small escape pod and thrown inside. Through the tiny window, he watched them take his ship, his crew, and his people. He watched until the Evergreen disappeared into hyperspace, carrying 12,000 humans to a fate worse than death. The journey back to human space took 4 months. The escape pod was damaged, and Samuel had very little food or water. He drifted through the cold darkness of space, surviving on hatred and the need to deliver his message. When a human rescue ship finally found him, Samuel was barely alive. His body was weak from starvation, and radiation had damaged his organs. The doctors said it was a miracle that he had survived at all. But his mind was clear, his purpose was sharp. The first words he spoke to his rescuers were simple: "Get me to Earth Command. Now, the galaxy needs to learn what happens when you hurt humanity." The rescue ship changed course immediately. Samuel Grant was going home, and he carried with him a story that would change everything. They had wanted to send a message to Earth. They had succeeded, but not in the way they expected. They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for a very long time. Something dangerous, something that would make the entire galaxy tremble. Samuel Grant stood before the United Earth Council in the Great Hall on New Geneva. His body was thin and weak from his months of suffering, but his eyes burned with a fire that made everyone uncomfortable. The council members sat in a half-circle around him, their faces showing shock and horror as he told his story. Every human settlement in the solar system was watching. The broadcast reached Mars, the moon bases, the asteroid mining stations, and the research outposts near Jupiter. Billions of people heard Samuel describe what had happened to the Evergreen. They heard about the families torn apart. They heard about the children dragged away in chains. They heard about Park dying to protect human knowledge. When Samuel finished speaking, there was complete silence in the hall. Then the shouting began. The council members argued for hours about what to do. Some wanted to send a formal complaint to the Concord of 12. Others wanted to declare war immediately. A few suggested that humanity should simply avoid space and accept their losses. Admiral Cole sat in the military section of the hall, listening to every word. She was 63 years old with short silver hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. She had spent her entire life building the Earth Defense Fleet, preparing humanity for whatever challenges the stars might bring. But she had always believed those challenges would be natural disasters or accidents, not deliberate cruelty. As she listened to the politicians argue, something cold and hard formed in her chest. This was not a problem that could be solved with words or treaties. They had shown humanity exactly what the galaxy thought of them. They were prey. They were cargo. They were nothing. The council voted to send a formal protest to the Concord of 12. They demanded the return of the Evergreen's passengers and punishment for the responsible. The response came back within a week. The Conquered rejected every demand. According to galactic law, they had acted within their rights as a founding member. The space around 442b belonged to them by ancient claim. Humans had no business traveling there without permission. The Council's protest was noted and dismissed. Read the response 3 times. Then she requested a private meeting with Director Charles of the Advanced Research Division. Charles was a quiet man who wore simple clothes and spoke softly. Most people thought he ran a small department that worked on theoretical physics. Very few knew the truth. They met in an underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. Charles led through corridors lined with thick metal doors and security checkpoints. Finally, they reached a room filled with holographic displays showing weapons that should not exist. "The Prometheus Protocol," Charles said quietly. "We've been developing these technologies for 40 years, just in case. We always hoped we would never need them." Looked at the displays. She saw ships that could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. She saw weapons that could tear apart matter at the molecular level. She saw defensive systems that could stop anything the Conquered could throw at them. "How long to make these operational?" she asked. Charles hesitated. "We would need at least 2 years. The manufacturing requirements alone would require a complete restructuring of our industrial capacity." Turned to face him directly. "You have 12 months, not a day more." The following year was the busiest in human history. On the surface, nothing seemed to change. Human diplomats continued to smile and negotiate with alien representatives. Trade ships still traveled between Earth and the few systems that welcomed them. The Council made speeches about peace and cooperation. Beneath the surface, everything changed. Factories that had built colony ships were secretly converted to produce war machines. Scientists who had studied the stars for wonder now studied them for weakness. Soldiers trained with new weapons that made their old equipment look like toys. Vance recovered from her injuries in a military hospital. The doctors replaced her shattered arm with a cybernetic limb that was stronger and faster than flesh could ever be. When she looked at her new arm, she did not see a disability. She saw a weapon. She volunteered to lead the training of a new Special Forces unit. These soldiers would be the first to fight when the time came. They trained harder than any humans had ever trained before. They learned to hate with discipline and focus. They learned that mercy was a luxury they could not afford. Samuel Grant became the public face of humanity's anger. He traveled to every human settlement, telling his story again and again. He spoke to miners on distant asteroids and researchers on frozen moons. His message was always the same. Remember what they did to us. Remember the children who were taken. Remember Park dying on his feet. Remember and prepare. Because when the time comes, we will make them pay for every single life they destroyed. Wherever he went, recruitment for the military increased. Young people who had dreamed of peaceful exploration now dreamed of vengeance. They had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about fear. Instead, they had united an entire species in cold, patient fury. The Conquered of 12 noticed the changes in human space. Their spies reported unusual activity in Earth's orbital facilities. Their analysts noted that human ships were traveling in new patterns. Their diplomats mentioned that human representatives seemed different somehow, more confident, more secretive. But the Conquered dismissed these concerns. What could humans possibly do? They were a young species with primitive technology. They had no allies and no experience in galactic warfare. Their emotional response to the Evergreen incident was understandable. Eventually, they would accept reality and return to their proper place. This was the greatest mistake the Conquered had ever made. 1 year after the Evergreen massacre, Admiral Cole stood before her senior officers in the command center of Earth's hidden fleet. Behind her, holographic displays showed the location of every military base, every defense platform, every ship in their vast empire. "Operation Prometheus begins in 72 hours, she said. "Our target is the complete destruction of the military capability. We will rescue our people. We will eliminate their ability to threaten us ever again. And we will send a message to the entire galaxy." Vance raised her cybernetic hand. "Admiral, when the Conquered sees what we've done, they will respond. All 12 species will come for us." Smiled, it was not a pleasant expression. "Let them come. We're counting on it. They are just the beginning. When this is over, the entire galaxy will understand one simple truth." She turned to face the star map, her eyes finding Earth among the countless points of light. "Humanity is nobody's prey. Not anymore, not ever again." The countdown began. In secret bases across human space, weapons powered up and soldiers prepared for battle. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. They thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they were. It was called Prime, and it was a monument to conquest. The planet had once been beautiful, with vast forests and crystal-clear oceans. Now it was covered entirely by cities built from the stolen wealth of 100 conquered worlds. The capital city alone stretched across an entire continent, filled with towers of living metal and streets paved with rare minerals. The royal palace stood at the center of the capital, so large that it could be seen from orbit. Its crystalline spires reached toward the sky like fingers grasping at the stars. Inside, the rulers of the lived in luxury that few species could imagine. High Commander stood in his war room on the top floor of the palace. He was studying reports from across the Empire, looking at fleet positions and resource allocations. It was boring work, but necessary for maintaining power. Occasionally, his thoughts drifted to the human colony ship they had captured a year ago. The slaves from that ship had sold well on the outer rim markets. Humans were apparently quite good at certain types of labor. One of his advisors had mentioned that the humans seemed angry about the incident, had dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. Younger species were always angry when they learned their true place in the galaxy. They would adapt. They always did. The sun was setting over the capital when the first warning alarms began to sound. A junior officer rushed into the war room, his chitin pale with shock. "High Commander, our sensors have detected a massive energy signature at the edge of the system. Thousands of ships have appeared from nowhere." Clicked his mandibles in annoyance. "Appeared from nowhere? That's impossible, show me." The holographic display activated and felt his blood turn cold. Thousands of human ships floated in perfect formation around Prime. They had not traveled through hyperspace like normal vessels. They had simply materialized, as if the distance between Earth and them meant nothing at all. Before he could give any orders, every screen in the war room flickered to life. A human woman appeared on all of them. She wore a military uniform and looked directly at the camera with eyes like frozen steel. "This is Admiral Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet," she said. "1 year ago, your species attacked an unarmed civilian vessel. You murdered our people. You sold our children into slavery. You laughed while you did it." Hissed and turned to his communications officer. "Cut this transmission immediately. Launch all fighters. Deploy the defense platforms." But the human admiral continued speaking as if she could hear him. "You told our captain to remember his place. You wanted us to be afraid. You wanted us to accept that we were nothing but prey for greater species to hunt." Around the planet, defense platforms began firing at the human fleet. Their weapons were the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of destroying entire enemy fleets in minutes. But when the plasma bolts struck the human shields, something strange happened. The shields absorbed the impacts without any visible damage, glowing with a soft light that hurt eyes. "We remembered our place," Admiral Cole continued. "We decided that our place is wherever we choose it to be, and we have decided that your place is nowhere at all." From the center of the human formation, a single ship moved forward. It was larger than the others, built around a device that pulsed with strange energy. The sensors could not understand what they were seeing. The readings made no sense according to known physics. The device activated. What followed would be remembered as the moment the universe screamed. A wave of impossible energy spread out from the human ship, moving through the fleet like fire through dry grass. But it did not burn the ships. It unmade them. The energy broke apart the molecular bonds that held matter together, dissolving everything it touched into nothing. In 90 seconds, the most powerful military force in the Empire ceased to exist. Watched in horror as thousands of his ships simply disappeared from the displays. Defense platforms that had protected Prime for centuries vanished like morning mist. The weapon the humans had created was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It did not just destroy, it erased. The human ground assault began immediately, descended through the atmosphere like metal rain, landing in the capital city and disgorging soldiers in advanced armor. These were not the primitive humans they had expected. These were warriors equipped with technology that matched or exceeded capabilities. Vance led the assault on the slave markets. Her cybernetic arm had been upgraded with the same technology that powered the human fleet. She was faster than any organic being had a right to be, stronger than soldiers twice her size. She moved through the guards like a storm through autumn leaves, unstoppable and merciless. The guards fought back with everything they had: plasma rifles, molecular blades, neural disruptors. None of it slowed down. Her armor absorbed impacts that should have killed her. Her targeting systems let her shoot with perfect accuracy even while moving at full speed. And her fury gave her strength beyond anything technology could provide. She reached the processing facility where human slaves were kept and tore the doors from their hinges with her bare hands. Inside, she found nearly 3,000 survivors from the Evergreen. They were thin and covered in scars. Many had been worked nearly to death. Some were barely conscious. Knelt beside a young woman who could not have been older than 20. The woman flinched away from her, expecting another beating. Then she saw his face, saw the human features and the tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's okay," whispered. "We came for you, Earth came for you, you're going home." The woman began to cry. Others around her did the same. For a year, they had believed they were forgotten. They had believed they would die as slaves on an alien world. Now their people had come for them with fire and fury, and nothing in the galaxy could stand in their way. Samuel Grant walked through the burning ruins of the royal palace. Human soldiers had secured the building, capturing or killing any who resisted. The crystalline spires were cracked and blackened. The stolen treasures were being returned to their original owners. He found hiding in a bunker deep beneath the throne room. The High Commander who had laughed while ordering the capture of the Evergreen was now curled in a corner, trembling like a frightened animal. "Please," begged when he saw Samuel approaching. "This was all a mistake. Your people will be returned. We will pay any reparations you demand. The conquered will negotiate a fair settlement." Samuel crouched down to look directly into the alien's eyes. "A year ago, you put me in an escape pod. You told me to tell Earth what happens to species that forget their place." He stood up slowly, his face showing no emotion at all. "I delivered your message. Now we're delivering ours." Samuel turned and walked away, leaving to the soldiers who followed. The High Commander's screams echoed through the bunker, but Samuel did not look back. He had spent a year imagining this moment. Now that it had arrived, he felt only emptiness. The execution was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. The conquered species watched in stunned silence as humans did what no young species had ever done before. They had not just fought back against their attackers, they had utterly destroyed them. Admiral Cole appeared on the Galactic Communication Network 1 hour after the battle ended. Her message was brief and clear. "The military no longer exists. Their leaders have been punished. Our people have been freed. Let this serve as a lesson to the entire galaxy. Humanity will not be prey. Humanity will not be slaves. Any species that threatens us will face the same fate. She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every viewer across 1,000 worlds. This is not a warning, this is a promise. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, in the halls of the conquered and the throne rooms of ancient empires, beings who had never known fear began to feel something cold growing in their hearts. The humans had come to the stars, and now the stars would learn to fear them. The destruction of the military sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For thousands of years, the conquered of 12 had maintained order among the stars. Young species rose and fell, but the founding members remained supreme. Their technology was the most advanced. Their fleets were the largest. Their word was law. Now one of those founding members had been broken by a species that was supposed to be primitive and weak. The humans had done the impossible. They had created weapons that should not exist. They had appeared in space without warning. They had erased an entire fleet in less than 2 minutes. The remaining 11 members of the conquered held an emergency meeting within days of the attack. Their representatives gathered in the Great Hall of Stars, a space station that floated between galaxies where the founders had met for. The atmosphere was tense with fear and anger. The representative spoke first. There were ancient beings made of pure energy, so old that they had watched stars being born. They had never considered any physical species to be a threat. Now their normally calm voice crackled with fury. The humans must be punished. They have violated every principle of galactic order. If we allow this attack to go unanswered, other young species will think they can challenge us. The ambassador slammed his stone fist on the table. There were warriors made of living rock, undefeated in battle for 10,000 years. I will lead the counteroffensive myself. Give me the combined fleet and I will reduce Earth to rubble. The Seraph Collective, a hive mind that spanned 3 star systems, calculated probabilities and shared their conclusion. A coordinated strike by all member species would overwhelm human defenses within 30 standard days. Their new technology is impressive, but they cannot stand against the combined might of the conquered. One by one, each species agreed to contribute ships to the largest fleet ever assembled. 200,000 warships from 11 civilizations gathered at the edge of human space. Each ship represented the best technology its species had developed over thousands of years of advancement. The fleet admirals were confident. The humans had surprised them once, but that advantage was gone. Now the full power of the galaxy would fall upon Earth like a hammer upon glass. This would not be a battle, it would be an execution. Admiral Cole watched the enemy fleet forming through long-range sensors. She sat in the command center of the Earth Defense Station, surrounded by her senior officers. On the displays around her, the conquered armada looked like a swarm of angry insects gathering for an attack. Vance studied the tactical data with her cybernetic eye. They're bringing everything they have. 200,000 ships, 11 different species. This is the largest military force in recorded galactic history. Nodded slowly. Good, that means they won't have anything left when this is over. The other officers exchanged worried glances. They had seen what human weapons could do at Prime, but this was different. This was the entire galaxy coming for them at once. Charles, the director of the research division, spoke up from his station. The web of fire is ready, Admiral. Every device is in position and armed. Allowed herself a small smile. Then let's welcome our guests. The conquered fleet entered the solar system with absolute confidence. Their sensors showed that the human ships had retreated toward Earth. Only automated defense platforms remained in the outer system, and those posed no real threat to the assembled armada. The admirals sent messages of congratulations to each other. Clearly, humanity had realized the futility of resistance. They advanced toward Earth in perfect formation, 11 species working together for the first time in centuries. Their weapons were charged. Their shields were at full power. They were ready to end the human threat forever. Then they crossed the orbit of Neptune, and the universe turned against them. Cole gave a single command: light the web. Throughout the solar system, hidden devices activated. Humanity had spent months seeding every asteroid, every comet, and every moon with dormant cascade weapons. Thousands of them, invisible to alien sensors, waiting for this moment. The devices fired simultaneously, creating overlapping fields of reality-warping energy. Space itself seemed to twist and scream as the fields spread across the solar system. The conquered ships flew straight into a trap that had been designed specifically for them. The cascade fields were hungry and selective. Charles had programmed them to ignore human vessels while targeting alien signatures. Ships that tried to flee found their escape routes blocked by walls of destructive energy. Ships that pushed forward were torn apart by forces their shields could not comprehend. The fleet was the first to fall. Their stone ships were supposed to be indestructible, but the cascade fields did not care about physical strength. The energy dissolved their rocky hulls as easily as it dissolved metal. The greatest warriors in the galaxy died without ever reaching their enemy. They tried to merge their energy forms to create a being powerful enough to overcome the human weapons. But the cascade affected pure energy even more severely than physical matter. The ancient beings who had watched stars being born were scattered like sparks from a fire, their consciousness torn apart by forces beyond their understanding. The Seraph Collective's hive mind became their greatest weakness. When one node of the collective fell, the shock rippled through all the others. Within minutes, an intelligence that had taken thousands of years to develop was broken into 1,000,000 screaming fragments. Species after species met the same fate. Their advanced technology meant nothing. Their ancient wisdom provided no protection. The web of fire consumed them all with equal efficiency. The battle lasted 3 days, not because humanity needed that long to win, but because wanted the galaxy to witness every moment. She wanted them to see what happened when you threatened Earth. She wanted them to understand that there would be no mercy for those who treated humans as prey. By the end, fewer than 10,000 conquered ships managed to escape the solar system. 200,000 had entered. The greatest military force ever assembled had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing for their lives. Broadcast her message to the retreating ships, knowing it would be transmitted across the galaxy. Her voice was calm and clear, without any trace of pride or satisfaction. We did not start this war. Your people attacked our civilians. Your people sold our children into slavery. Your people laughed at our pain and told us to accept our place as prey. She paused, letting her words sink in across 1,000 worlds. We have ended this war, but let me be very clear about what comes next. If any species threatens humanity again, if any of you ever thinks about harming our people, you will face the same fate as the same fate as this fleet. She leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to burn through the screen. The galaxy is very large. There is room for all of us to live in peace, but peace requires respect. You will respect humanity now, not because we ask for it, not because we deserve it, because you have no choice. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, the survivors of the conquered fleet scattered to there. They carried with them stories of what they had witnessed, stories of weapons that should not exist, stories of a young species that had broken the oldest powers in the galaxy. Vance found in her quarters after the battle. The Admiral was sitting by the window, looking out at the stars. "Is it over?" asked. Shook her head slowly. "The fighting is over. What comes next is something else entirely. We've changed everything. The galaxy will never be the same." Sat down beside her. "Do you regret it?" Considered the question for a long time. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that we had to become this. But I do not regret protecting our people. I do not regret making sure that no one will ever treat humans as prey again." She turned to look at, and there was something ancient in her eyes. "We came to the stars hopping to find friends. Instead, we found a galaxy that only respects power. So we became powerful. Now we'll see if the galaxy can learn to live with what we've become." Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance. But everything had changed. Humanity had announced itself to the universe in fire and fury, and now the universe would have to decide what to do about it. In the years that followed the Battle of Saul, something strange happened to the galaxy. The great powers that had ruled for suddenly became very quiet. The conquered of 12 was now the conquered of 6, with 5 founding members either destroyed or reduced to scattered survivors. The remaining members stopped sending ships to human space. They stopped making demands. They stopped treating humanity as a minor species beneath their notice. They simply stopped. The galaxy went silent. Vance noticed it first during a diplomatic mission to meet with the survivors. The ancient energy beings had rebuilt some of their consciousness, though they were far weaker than before. When ship arrived, the representatives came to meet her with something she had never seen from them before: fear. They spoke to her in careful, measured tones. They asked permission before making any requests. They apologized for things that had happened thousands of years ago, long before humans had even left their home planet. These beings who had watched the birth of stars were now terrified of a species that had been traveling among them for less than a century. Reported her observations to Earth Command. Similar stories came in from other human diplomats across the galaxy. Everywhere they went, they found the same thing. Species that had once ignored humanity now went out of their way to avoid offending them. Trade routes that had passed through human space for generations were rerouted to go around it. Expansion plans were abandoned if they came anywhere near human-claimed territory. The message had been received. The galaxy understood. Admiral Cole retired 2 years after the war. She had done what needed to be done, but the weight of it had changed her. She spent her remaining years in a small house by the ocean on Earth, watching the waves and thinking about what humanity had become. Before she left her position, she gave one final address to the people of Earth. Her words were broadcast to every human settlement across the stars, and they would be remembered for generations to come. "We came to the stars hopping to find friends," she said. "We found predators instead. They taught us that the galaxy respects only one thing: strength. So we became strong. We became what we needed to become to survive." She paused, and there was sadness in her old eyes. "I do not celebrate what we have done. I mourn the necessity of it, but I will not apologize for protecting our people. I will not apologize for making sure that no human child will ever be sold into slavery again. The galaxy forced us to show our teeth. Now they know what we are." Vance took command of the Earth Defense Fleet after his retirement. She had changed in the years since the Evergreen Massacre. The young woman who had fought with desperate courage against the boarding parties was gone. In her place was something harder and colder, a warrior who had seen too much to ever be innocent again. But she remembered why she fought. She remembered the faces of the survivors she had pulled from the slave pens on Prime. She remembered holding them as they wept with relief and disbelief. That memory kept her human, even when her duties demanded she be something else. Samuel Grant became the first human ambassador to the galactic community. He walked through halls where humans had once been considered beneath notice, and now every species parted before him with respect that bordered on terror. He hated what he had become. He hated that his name was associated with the violence that had followed his return to Earth. But he understood why it had been necessary. He spent his years as ambassador trying to build something better. He reached out to species that had not been part of the conquered, younger civilizations that had suffered under the old order just as humanity had. He formed alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. He showed the galaxy that humans could be partners, not just conquerors. Some species responded well. They saw in humanity a chance to build a new kind of galactic order, one where strength was not the only thing that mattered. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges began. Slowly, carefully, humans started making the friends they had originally hoped to find in the stars. Other species never forgave what humanity had done. The surviving retreated to their home system and cut off all contact with the outside universe. The fragments of the Seraph Collective spent centuries trying to rebuild their hive mind, their hatred of humanity, the only thing holding them together. The survivors scattered to the edges of known space, nursing their wounds and dreaming of revenge they would never achieve. Time passed. Decades became centuries. Humanity spread across the stars, claiming worlds that no other species dared to contest. Their technology continued to advance, always staying ahead of any potential threat. The Cascade weapons were never used again, but everyone knew they could be. On the 100th anniversary of the Evergreen Massacre, Admiral Vance stood before the memorial on Luna's surface. She was old now, her once dark hair turned silver by time. Her cybernetic arm had been upgraded many times over the years, each improvement making her more capable, but also more distant from the young woman she had once been. The memorial was a wall of black stone, carved with 12,000 names. The passengers and crew of the Evergreen, the people who had died in slavery or whose fates were never known, and those like Park who had given their lives defending human knowledge. Behind the wall, Earth hung in the sky like a blue jewel, the home that humanity had fought so hard to protect. Thousands of people had gathered for the ceremony. Soldiers in dress uniforms, politicians in formal robes, families who had lost loved ones a century ago, and young people who had only known the galaxy as it was now, a place where humanity was respected and feared in equal measure. Spoke to all of them. 100 years ago, the galaxy taught us a terrible lesson. They taught us that kindness would be seen as weakness. They taught us that mercy would be exploited. They taught us that the only thing the universe respects is power. She paused, looking up at the names carved into the stone. We learned that lesson. We learned it so well that the entire galaxy fell silent rather than face us again. Some of you might call that a victory. I call it a tragedy. Not because we were wrong to fight back. We were right. They gave us no choice. But the fact that we had to become this, that we had to show the universe what happens when you hurt humanity, that is the tragedy. She turned to face the crowd, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. We remember the people who were taken from us. We remember the suffering they endured. We remember the price we paid to ensure it would never happen again. And we remember that power is not the same as virtue. Being strong enough to destroy our enemies does not make us better than them. What makes us better is what we choose to do with that strength. A young officer approached her after the ceremony. He was barely 20 years old, born decades after the war had ended. He had grown up in a galaxy where humanity was a great power, where no species dared to threaten human citizens. "Admiral," he said, "you were there at the beginning. Do you ever regret what happened? Do you ever wish things had been different?" Looked at him for a long moment. She saw his youth, his innocence, his complete inability to understand what the galaxy had been like before humanity proved its strength. She hymned that innocence, even as she worked every day to protect it. "I wish they had let the Evergreen pass in peace," she finally said. "I wish they had treated us as equals instead of prey. I wish the galaxy had been the kind of place where we could have found friends without first having to prove we were too dangerous to attack." She reached out and touched his shoulder with her cybernetic hand. "But wishes don't change reality. They gave us no choice. We did what we had to do. And now, because of what we did, you get to grow up in a galaxy where being human means something. You get to explore the stars without fear. You get to dream of peace instead of war." She smiled, and for just a moment, she looked like the young woman she had once been. "That's why we fought. That's why we became what we became, so that your generation could be better than us, so that you could find the friends we never did." The young officer saluted and walked away, leaving alone with the memorial. She stood there for a long time, looking at the names of the dead, thinking about everything that had happened since that terrible day when they had taught humanity what the galaxy truly was. The stars continued their ancient dance above her, indifferent to the dramas of the small creatures who lived beneath them. But those small creatures had changed everything. They had reached for the stars seeking peace. They had found war instead. And when they fought back, they fought with such savage determination that the entire galaxy chose silence over confrontation. Earth's children had grown up, and the universe would never forget it. The galaxy remained silent for 1,000 years, and in that silence, humanity built something new, something better, something that the old powers in their arrogance had never imagined possible. They built hope, and that, in the end, was their greatest victory of all.